Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, unexpected podcasts are my very favorite podcasts, so I am great. Every time we think we've got the next week of podcasts pretty well laid out, and it's like, okay, we're definitely going to, we'll have this show on this day, and this show on this day, and this show on this day, and it'll be great, and we'll have it all spaced out nicely. And it's like, oh, now we're going to be talking to Ryan Day on Saturday, and he's going to be making a significant announcement. Okay, we're going to have to do a show on Saturday. All right. So that's fine. Now we have another show already planned for the middle of next week. So that's great. We're working ahead. Good for us.
Planning is both good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it just depends on how you look at it. Although, Tom, I remember one of our other emergency shows was Chase Young getting suspended. So I don't know if these shows are always good or always fun, or if they are for you, then you have just confirmed yourself as the absolute hater on this show, which, that's on brand for you.
We all have our roles to play. That's what I'm here for. You are here to tell us who Ohio State's starting quarterback is going to be. And Tony, it was a huge shock to me. I don't know about you, but who is Ohio State's starting quarterback this year?
Ryan Day on Saturday named CJ Stroud, redshirt freshman, the Ohio State starting quarterback for just the Minnesota game. We'll see what goes on after that. I suspect he'll continue on being the starting quarterback after that, but they told us a few days ago, earlier in the week, that CJ Stroud had separated himself from the other guys, and then they had their last scrimmage on Friday, and that pretty much solidified it for Day. And CJ Stroud graded out a champion in the scrimmage, did what they needed to see, and now it is time to say, Tom, we are now in the CJ Stroud era. How's it feel?
It feels pretty exciting. It feels not entirely unexpected. I feel like, from about the start of last season, we were kind of going, I think he's going to be the guy who's who's the guy after Justin Fields. And this is probably going to be Justin Fields last year. So feels like it's probably going to be the CJ Stroud era sooner rather than later. And it really, Jack Miller was the second guy in off the bench in the Nebraska game, and he played in one other game last year that CJ Stroud didn't. But then in the Michigan State game, that was CJ Stroud. When it was the Clemson game and they needed someone to come in, it was CJ Stroud. It was CJ Stroud with the ones all through the spring. It was CJ Stroud with the ones all through the summer. This has kind of felt inevitable this whole time. And the answer never really wavered. Like there were times you'd hear reports like, oh, it's getting closer. Maybe the battle's, tightening up a little bit. And then, nope, there's more separation now. He was sometimes, if he was a horse running the Kentucky Derby, sometimes he was ahead by 5 lengths. Sometimes the other horses had closed it to 2, but he was in the lead the whole time. So go ahead and if you have a CJ Stroud ticket, picking CJ Stroud to win, you can go ahead and cash that ticket. Yes, think the long-awaited and long-anticipated answer has arrived, and it is exactly what we thought it would be.
Yes, from post to post, CJ Stroud. There are several reasons why Ryan Day named Stroud the starter. There was his anticipation. He's a good anticipatory thrower. He can drop the ball in. He's broadened his leadership role. He's become more vocal. He obviously has a strong arm. They even said they've been surprised by his ability to get out of trouble. And that doesn't necessarily just mean takeoff and scrambling. It could also mean just keeping a play alive in the pocket and getting rid of the ball. So he's moving the ball better than any of the other quarterbacks. That usually goes a long way in naming a starting quarterback or winning that job. You also have to be safe with the ball. The assumption at this point is that he has been there. There really hasn't been, now that I think about it, there hasn't been all that much talk about turnovers from the quarterbacks, or this guy needs to clean this up. But there really hasn't been any of that. So decision-making was also another very big factor for Stroud. And right now, I wonder, you have 5 boxes to check. It seems like he was the guy in each of those boxes, because Day went down and said, he's good at this. This is really good. He's good at this. He could do this. Kyle McCord probably has a stronger arm, but maybe that's one for Kyle McCord. But all in all, CJ Stroud's arm is strong enough, and it is strong. And then you throw in the anticipation of knowing where to go, when to go, who to go to. there was, it was from post to post. And the potential here, Tom, is I think when I've projected, you've projected, you assume there's going to be big numbers. What is it? 3,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, something like that. And for as happy and relieved almost as Day was, he said he's excited about it. He feels good about it. If you feel good about it, then that tells me there's going to be as many points as we have sort of anticipated from this offense if CJ Stroud is good, and it sounds like he's good, so expect some fireworks.
Some fireworks is probably about right. I mean, he's not necessarily like Justin Fields level tools. He's a pretty good, talented, athletic quarterback, but he's not necessarily Justin Fields' arm strength coupled with Justin Fields' speed. But almost no one is. And you think Justin Fields coming in as a redshirt freshman, his first year starting with Ohio State was 41 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I don't know that CJ Stroud's going to get there, but CJ Stroud has had another year under Ryan Day in the Ohio State system. And there's, the usual 2020 asterisk applies there that no, this was not a normal year, but he has another year under his belt with Ryan Day than Justin Fields did when he came in. So something in that neighborhood is probably not out of the realm of possibility. And, is that 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns, 35 touchdowns and 8 interceptions? Like that would be a markedly, that would be a step back from what Justin Fields was in 2019. That would also be an exceptionally good year. And that's a year that gets Ohio State into the college football playoff if they do that. So I think that's all well within the realm of possibility for CJ Stroud. He kind of, as you said, he checks all the boxes. He does everything they need him to do. He is not he does not have the Kyle McCord arm, which is okay. That's okay. And Kyle McCord is probably a good, solid number 2 on this team. If you want to read the tea leaves there, that was not something that was announced. But if you kind of want to read the tea leaves, it sounds like that may be where things are trending right now for Ohio State. So, I think Ryan Day feeling comfortable tells me Ryan Day feels pretty good about his number 1 and probably feels pretty good about the guy who's, some of the other potential answers in that room, because you're not 100% sure, certain to have a quarterback make it through a season healthy. But if you have a couple guys or 3 guys in there that you feel reasonably good about, you're probably going to be feeling pretty good about where things stand.
Yeah, and Day was, he mentioned a couple of times that Stroud has looked good in practice, but he hasn't been hit yet. The quarterbacks haven't been live. They'll know more once they see a defense coming after him, trying to hurt him friendlily enough, like not, injure him, but, like trying to hurt him and then pick him up like, hey, good game, buddy. And then also hit him again. And so he hasn't had to experience that. He knows Zach Harrison isn't going to take his head off. He knows, Tyreek Smith isn't going to take him out at the knee. Not that Tyreek Smith is that kind of guy. Okay. But there are some safety factors and some calmness that a quarterback can have dealing with that. And then that all goes out the window. Once they get on the plane, Tom, to Minnesota, that's all out the window. And so he's going to have to deal with that and get used to that. But, and that was something they told him, is like, you're going to have to get tough. Like you have, not that you have to get tough, you have to be tough. Justin Fields was tough. You got to be able to get hit. You got to be able to take hits and get back up. And he talked about how your lineman blocking for you and the lineman the defensive linemen they're all taped up. They've got cuts and bruises, but they keep going out there. Quarterback has to do the same thing. So that's something you don't always necessarily know about. Although I'm thinking back, like Braxton Miller would get hit and it would almost be like, a sniper hit him from the Lincoln Tower or something. And the ambulance would have to come back and then he'd be back out on the field in the next quarter. So, and I'm guessing like that was known in the building. Like, yeah, sometimes there's some drama there. And so I think they know you wouldn't put him out there if he's not tough, like I think they have a good idea that he's going to be tough enough to handle that. But, we'll see in Minnesota. Tom, do you think I think he's tough. I'm interested to hear, like, do you think he can handle this?
My suspicion is that whenever he is hit for the first time against Minnesota, it will not be the first time he is hit in his career. He did not get hit last or this year so far. I think he got hit probably a few times last year. while he was on the field. I'm sure he's gotten hit during high school like this. I'm sure he has gotten to this level. So yeah, I mean, you go back to like Trevion Henderson telling us, it was going to take one good hit and then he'd be, really feel like he was in the game back in the spring because he hadn't played football last fall. It's probably going to be kind of like that for CJ Stroud, where it's like you're going to get hit at some point, and hopefully that's not getting drilled from the blind side by someone who weighs 350 pounds and lands right on you. You hope it's something a little less direct than that, but get bopped at once, bopped at some point, and okay, now you're in the game and you remember how it feels and you go from there. So yeah, I don't, that's not a real big concern to me, but that's always, I mean, you go back to the years when Ohio State has gotten quarterbacks hurt in the offseason. I always feel like you maybe want to make them live at some point, and that's just very clearly something they don't do. They're in those black no contact jerseys the whole offseason. And you go back to Mike Tomczak breaking his leg in the spring game in 1984 or 5, whenever that was. That's why they don't do it. But I always feel like everyone else gets tackled at some point. The running backs will get tackled. A lot of times when we're watching practice, they're telling the guys, stay up, don't don't go to the ground. They do get tackled during the scrimmages. It seems like you might want to let the quarterback get hit at least a couple times, during some of those scrimmages. But that is not this is, as we have all learned in life repeatedly over the last year, everything is risk versus reward, and everyone's making their own choices and all of that. So that is the choice that the coaches have made is keep the quarterback safe, keep the quarterbacks healthy, and then hope the offensive line doesn't let him get hit very much when they're playing in a game.
I will correct you on one thing. Ohio State did let the quarterbacks get hit in practice under Urban Meyer, but it was the other quarterbacks hitting them in the circle drill.
Oh, okay, that's true. Okay, that's true. I was going to say I don't remember that, but you're right. You're right. The quarterbacks were in the circle drill
for whatever reason. So yes, they know what it's like to be hit blindsided by a defensive end because they've gone head to head with a quarterback before. So don't worry about them. They'll be just fine. Kyle McCord was asked about, and there's no backup just yet. That process will continue to play out. What was interesting, and you alluded to it, Ryan Day said, yeah, Kyle McCord, he's catching up. He's a year behind those two, and Jack Miller and CJ Stroud, but he's ahead of where they were at this same point in their careers. And that's what we've talked about with Kyle McCord catching Jack Miller and passing him at some point. It seems like that happened this camp just based on some of the reps that we've seen. And, if something happens to CJ Stroud and he has to leave for a couple plays on the road at Minnesota, do they go with McCord or do they go with the guy who's actually been in a game, albeit 10 snaps, I think, in 2 games, maybe just one game. CJ Stroud has played 8 snaps in 3 games, but is there a huge difference between Jack Miller's playing time and Kyle McCord's playing time? I don't know at this point.
Yeah, at this point, I think you just go with whoever's best. And I mean, there's all the game theory things with do you keep both guys engaged to avoid having someone transfer out, and you're keeping things looking equal-ish enough that you keep everyone happy and on the team. It kind of depends on what the situation is. If it's the first quarter and it's 7-3 and you're going to play the best guy. If it's the fourth quarter and you're up by 35 points, maybe you play the political game and let the guy who you're worried about potentially transferring play a little more. But yeah, it kind of depends on what that situation is. Cause what you go back to the Sugar Bowl when Justin Fields got speared on the hip and, went out, and it's the first half of a college football playoff game and you don't know how long he's going to be out. There was no question in my mind who was going to be trotting onto the field at that point. It wasn't like, I wonder if they'll make a political choice here. No, like this is a game you have to win. So you're going to play the guy who gives you the best chance to win. You may be in that situation against Minnesota, depending on, when something theoretically might happen.
And then last thing on the quarterbacks before we move to the captains, that subject was talked about in terms of transferring and this and that. And he said the conversations have been good with the players. Right now, they're just focused on development. Here's this quote. It's been all about development regarding their conversations with Jack Miller and Kyle McCord. Those guys are in it for the long haul. They're great teammates. They know the focus has to be on development. We've talked about this early on. They know They knew that there's going to be one quarterback that starts against Minnesota. That's the only thing that's guaranteed. They're all here to continue to work and grow. Their attitudes have been excellent. So that's been their focus. Now, listen, we get to January and see what the year brings. I think we all come up for air and reassess. That's all fair. I totally get it. But right now, I know that they're committed and they want to be here. That's what you would expect a coach to say. But again, there's no reason to leave right now. So I like, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You're going to sit out and not do anything, not get developed, not get any better. And at least under Ryan Day and Corey Dennis and Kevin Wilson, you're in one of the best offenses in college football and you're learning every single day.
And there's a possibility you're playing for a championship this year. And there's a possibility we have seen seasons where Ohio State has had a pretty good season despite getting to the third quarterback on their depth chart. Like that is a thing that has happened in the past. But, it seems like that's very much the rational answer. But you go back to last year with Dylan McCaffrey at Michigan, and he transferred out, like, I think the semester had started. So it was just like he put himself in the transfer portal and but didn't play. Like, it was far enough in that he couldn't transfer to another school and play last fall or even be on the roster and enrolled in classes. He just basically was like, oh, I'm not going to play this year because I'm leaving ultimately. So I'm not going to, and theoretically someone could do that. I don't think that's the rational choice here. I think you're better off doing what Ryan Day is suggesting there, which is spend another year of development, continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to play football, get reps, maybe win another Big Ten, maybe go to the college football playoff, maybe win a national championship, and then, and maybe get a chance to play if guys get hurt. Because I mean, how many seasons has Ohio State not needed their second quarterback to take, at least one meaningful rep during the course of the year? I mean, can you think of any? I feel like you go back to Braxton Miller. It was like every week it felt like, well, someone's coming in a meaningful spot because Braxton Miller's hurt. It's Kenny Guyton time again. How about that? Like, it just that every year that's the case. So, and just because you're the free guy now, it doesn't mean that you couldn't theoretically become the two guy, or the depth chart couldn't get you into the third guy. I mean, these are all things that can happen. So yeah, you're right. I think it makes a lot of sense for someone to stick around. But I think people have done things that haven't made sense to me before, so you never know.
Fair point. I will conclude with this. The last time Ohio State started a redshirt freshman quarterback, they won the national title, and it was not that redshirt freshman quarterback who was playing in the playoffs. So think about that one.
That's true.
So, and that being, of course, JT Barrett, 2014. You remember Cardale Jones stepped in for the injured Barrett. Do you remember that, Tom?
I do. Wasn't Justin Fields a redshirt freshman in 2019?
He was a sophomore.
Was he a sophomore? I didn't remember if he played enough.
He played in like 8 or 9 games.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yes. So that'll do that on the quarterbacks. Let's talk about the captains. Ohio State, Ryan Day named 6 captains. I think it was 7 the last couple of years, I think. Mm-hmm. This time only 6. He did say they were voted on by the teammates. And, like the coach always has maybe the most votes or the deciding votes. But the captains on offense, Thayer Munford, Chris Olave, Cameron Babb. On defense, Taraja Mitchell, Haskell Garrett, and Zach Harrison. For me, obviously, not just for me, I think for everybody, they see Cameron Babb, the wide receiver who actually finally got to play last year, played quite a bit on special teams, got some time on the offense, has not yet had a catch at Ohio State. This is his 4th year now, but is now dealing with his 4th ACL, is unavailable. And I'm sure a lot of people were shocked to see his name. I'm sure a lot of people were like, who's Cameron Babb? But this gives you an idea of who Cameron Babb is in terms of the people in the building and the players and their respect they have for him. They know who he is. Were you surprised by it? And then, because I was surprised by it, but then not, from thinking back to the stuff we've heard about him.
Right. And my first reaction was good for him. Like that's that was more than surprise. It was just kind of like, well, that's awesome. Like that's a cool, I mean, you go through the different guys on that list. And it's like, there's so many different stories there. And they're like interesting stories, very different paths. You've got Zach Harrison, who was the mega hype 5-star. This is just his 3rd season. And, he's had one path there. Cam Babb was someone who, if you go back to the recruiting cycles when he was committed and before he signed, he was someone who was getting talked up as like the next big thing at Ohio State as a wide receiver and just can't stay healthy, but he's stuck with it. Like there's a lot of guys who would have taken a, medical hardship retirement at this point, and he just keeps sticking with it. And you could tell it meant a lot to him to be on the field last season. And he was covering punts in the national championship game. And I think he ran some routes in the national championship game. I think he played some at wide receiver, either in the Sugar Bowl or the national championship game. He's gotten out there a little bit, and then another injury. I mean, it's been more than a little unfair how his career has panned out, but he's stuck with it. And he is not, this is not a Rudy story where it's this scrappy underdog who has no talent, who's just, doing it unsure. This is someone who was incredibly talented, and his body has just not held up, a little bit, a more dramatic version of like Justin Hilliard's story, basically, where Justin Hilliard just couldn't stay healthy and on the field, but then, stuck it out and turned into a really useful contributor the last year on a team that made the national championship game. So, yeah, but you've got, Thayer Munford's story is remarkable in its own way. It is a bunch of really, really remarkable players. And what was maybe the most interesting thing to me was you looked at that list and you really couldn't argue with any of them. But then it was like, man, think about some of the people who aren't captains, who, are like incredibly high character people, team leader types. I mean, like there's probably another half dozen or so that I would say, oh yeah, like that person absolutely should be or could be a captain. And not everyone can be a captain, because if everyone's a captain, then no one's a captain. So, but yeah, no, that was my first initial reaction on Cam Babb. Was good for him, and that was really my reaction for pretty much everyone there.
Yeah, and that's the appropriate reaction, instead of why not this guy, why not that guy. Like, I'm not going to get up here like Dick Vitale after all of the brackets have been announced. He's like, what about Oral Roberts? They won the league. I'm devastated.
That's probably not the example to give on an Ohio State podcast.
Well, it was the only basketball team in my mind right now for
it felt like
bias.
It felt like about 17 years in a row where he was complaining about how unfair it was that Virginia Tech got left out. Yeah. It's like, yes, but they're always the 68th best team in the country. So yeah.
So it's too bad, because they would have won it that year if they would have just gotten in. But good to see Zach Harrison, a junior, on the list. Taraja Mitchell as a guy like Cameron Babb, who's never started. That's impressive, to have the respect of your teammates when there are other multi-year starters out there that could have been named. And as Ryan Day said, they're going to have leaders that aren't just captains, and the quarterback is one. Jeremy Rucker is another. Nicholas Petit-Frere. Like, you need all kinds of guys to be leaders if you're going to have a good culture, which they seem to think they do. Tom, anything else? This was a quick emergency episode. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we let people go?
Do you want to let anyone know who you think the diaper dandy of the year is going to be for the Buckeyes, baby?
No, I'd rather not. I think unless you do your Dick Vitale impersonation in Australian.
Mm. I don't think I can do that. I think that would careen wildly from one to the other, like a car, like those videos of cars going down, like just like black ice hills, just like, like a bumper pool kind of game or something, just bouncing back and forth, pinball back and forth between the curbs. Yeah, I think that would end up going. That would definitely end up with me in a ditch. So no, I think no, that will probably not be something that I will do. But thank you for asking.
One of these times I'm going to ask you, and you're going to try, and you're just going to be like, you're just going to drop. Like, the brain won't. It just slams up like a computer. You've asked to do too much stuff.
Somebody unplug Tom and plug him back in.
Just give it like 30 seconds. So that will do it. I want to thank you guys. Big time information right now on the Ask the Insiders board scrimmage report. Some news about one of the top prospects in the 2023 class, also that you would want to check out. So a bunch of us were out throughout the state of Ohio and even the state of Indiana checking out high school football Friday night. I was in Findlay looking at Luke Montgomery, the left tackle there. He was very impressive. We'll have video of that. We'll have video from all of these different games to check out. You can find that eventually on BuckeyeScoop.com or eventually at YouTube.com/BuckeyeScoop, and all of that goodness is on the internet there for you. So thank you guys. And believe it or not, we will talk to you tomorrow.